Bob Johnson, United States Marine Corps, Korea, the Forgotten War. I had the pleasure of interviewing Bob in Phoenix, Arizona. It was November the 9th, 2006. And Bob told me a great story of the Chosin Reservoir, what happened there. He's one of the chosen few that I have in my documentary series. He was born in 1928. At the age of 19, he enlisted in the Marine Reserves in 1948 after World War II. 2 years later, he was fighting in Korea at the age of 21. He served with the 7th Marine Regiment, H&S Company of the 1st Marine Division, and he has a powerful story to tell. Like I said, his birthday is actually today as I record this. It's November 26, 2022. Bob was born November 26, 1928, same year as my mom was born. One of my heroes of Korea. Bob, thank you for sharing your story with me. And I want to give a special thank you again to Brandon Glidden for making these stories possible. Brandon, thank you for your service to our country. I salute you, sir. I thank you for patriotism and your service in the United States Army. So God bless you, Brandon. Folks, if you'd like to become a sponsor, I would encourage you to do so or to donate to my work. Like I said, I don't monetize these videos. It comes from you, the viewers and listeners. I would encourage you to become a sponsor. There's information in the video description, in the comments section of the video, and on my website, larrycappetto.com. Let's keep this thing going, folks. History is best learned from those who were there. All these stories, they need to be told, the voices of history, right here on the YouTube channel that I've sponsored. Thank you, folks, for watching today, sharing these stories, and for becoming a subscriber of this channel. I really appreciate it, and I don't take it for granted. I'm just in great gratitude for all those that have helped sponsor my work. So God bless you. Thank you for watching. Talk to you soon. Some fine last second adjustments here. You comfortable there? I don't want you moving a whole lot. You can stay right there. So you can hear me okay? Okay. 1st Marine Division?
Yeah, 7th Marine, H&S Company, 7th Marines.
How old are you now, Bob?
In about 10 days I'll be 78.
Okay. How old were you back in 1950?
I was an old guy at 21.
So what's your birth date, did you say?
November 26,
okay.
1928.
Wow. The same age as my mother there, okay.
Oh, I hope that's good.
Yeah. What year did you go into the Marines?
I joined the Marine Reserves in 1948.
Wow, right after World War II, huh?
Yeah.
Tail end there.
The World War II was the end of all wars.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as I said, I joined in 1948 for 2 years. May of 1950, I re-enlisted again in the Marine Corps Reserves. In June of 1950, the war started. July, I got my greetings. August, I was on my way. I did not go to boot camp. I'd been to 2 summer camps and fired a couple clips of ammo in 2 years, and I knew which way to point the gun, and that was it. But I was ready for war.
Give me a little bit of history about Korea, why we were there and who we were fighting.
Well, obviously, it was still part of the Cold War, and the idea was, at least from the communist point of view, was that if they started with a more or less it was what they called a small war like this, North Korea invade South Korea, and that would have already become a communist state. Well, obviously, the United Nations and the United States decided that this is the place to draw a line in the sand. And obviously, the only way to do that was to put forces in there and stop their aggression before it went any further.
What was your MOS? Were you a rifleman?
Well, every Marine is a rifleman.
Sure.
But I was a 3500 to start with, which is a motor transport, basically a Jeep driver, and then I became a heavy duty 3531.
Mm-hmm. Did you make the NMHOM landing?
I was about 4 days behind that for the simple reason that it took 16 days to come from San Diego to go to Korea by ship. Well, it goes by way of the Aleutian Islands, and he had a terrific storm up there, and it almost destroyed our ship, sunk it almost. In fact, I've told my wife many times that I was more scared of falling into that ice-choked water than I ever was in Korea. And for obvious reasons, they had to go to Japan and refit it and take off the people with broken legs and stuff from the storm, and that's why we were 4 days behind.
Where were you Thanksgiving 1950?
I was at Udam, which is basically almost as far as the Marines went. And obviously, according to what history books you read, it started on my birthday or the day after, November 26th, 1950.
Can you walk me into the Chosin Reservoir as far as if you want to back up a week or two or a month, and as you guys made inroads in there, were you fighting the North Koreans at all at this point, or were they just...
Yeah, well, they were basically on retreat. That's where the Incheon landing came in. The idea to trap all these North Koreans down in the south, cut across and to the other side of the peninsula, and more or less catch them as they came by. Well, that was fine, except they became a guerrilla force, and to a degree, but it really wasn't that serious until the Chinese came along. And I will say that after we landed at Wonchon in October, we ran across parts of Chinese people were just kind of feigning situations to find out what we were doing, and vice versa, patrols and so on. And the Marines told General MacArthur in Japan that the Chinese were here, and sometimes we think it's in force. And he said, well, no, he says, that's just a few laundrymen, and a couple of Marines could take care of them. Don't worry about it. But they had 120,000 people had come across the ice of the Yellow River. And obviously, and our intelligence did not see one of them as far as they were concerned. They weren't there. And obviously, they snuck around and circled us, and that's where the Chosin Reservoir battle started.
Why was that the actual physical name of the reservoir there, the Chosin Reservoir?
It's called another name, Changjin, I think it is, or something like that. And it's basically on a lot of maps then and now, but most of them said Chosin, and that's what we know it is because we were there. We don't recognize the other name.
Tell me a little bit, I know it's been a long time, but I'm sure it's still in your memory, about the weather at that time and how that affected the operation.
Well, actually, as I always said to everybody, both the Chinese and the United Nations troops were both fighting two enemies. We were fighting the Chinese, they were fighting us, and we were both fighting the cold. And actually, I think basically the cold was on our favor because we had just a little bit better equipment and weatherproof clothing than the Chinese did. They had cotton quilted outfits to wear, and obviously they did not keep the cold out at all. And when it's, I have a book of my personal stories from letters that I wrote my wife-to-be, and it tells exactly about the weather and how cold it was, and people, basically, more people turning in because of frostbite and delirium than they were from getting shot.
What's vivid in your memories, Bob, about the cold? I mean, how did that affect you personally? And
well, as we speak, anybody that can actually truthfully say they were at the Chosin Reservoir battle has degrees of illnesses. Mine, I have very poor feet, and they had frostbitten over there, and I have no feelings in the ends of my fingers. And many other problems. I have a spot on my lung in which many other people have the same thing, and there's possibility that was caused by breathing 2 weeks of up to 60 below zero weather, and you can't get out of it. It's there, it was there then, it stayed with us today.
Does the cold affect you today? I mean, if you go into a cold environment?
Well, you know, I don't have to go. That's why I live in Phoenix. I'm from the Seattle area, and I could not stand the dampness. It wasn't really terribly cold up there, but it's damp. And the only way to beat that is to get out of it and go to a warmer climate, which in case, quite often during the summer when it's 115 outside, I still have an extra blanket on my bed, believe it or not, because I'm cold.
Well, I know some of the guys that still sleep with socks on their feet.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah. Tell me, Bob, walk me into this as a young man. Have you been in combat before?
No.
Okay. So what are your first recollections of combat, where you were, what was happening, and describe the scene?
Well, I'll back up a little bit and said that, as I said, they called in the reserves. They put us on a train, went down to Camp Pendleton, the Marine base, for supposedly additional training. Well, I happened to be I guess you'd be either lucky or unlucky, but they said everybody in this particular car would be on mess duty, and I took it for granted it would be for a couple of days. As it was, all the time we were there, I never left. I never went out to do any sighting of rifles. I didn't fire one. I didn't throw a grenade. I didn't do anything. I stayed in the mess hall, and all of a sudden they said, "This place is closing down. Get on the truck outside, and we're going down to the ship." So I get on there, and for 2 days I wander around because my name isn't on any list. I'm not supposed to be on the ship. Went the wrong direction, and the old story is the captain wouldn't turn the ship around for me. So away I went. I got my training by firing off the fantail.
Explain that.
Well, they just throw boxes and junk out there, and the idea, you pretend it's an enemy, and of course it's moving just like an enemy would in the water. So if you're going to learn anything, you better do it now. It might save your life.
Did you feel invincible as a young man, that like nothing could hurt you, or
no? No, I did not feel that way. I figured that there was somebody was trying to ruin my life. And I don't know whether I'm going to survive this. I hope I do. And I was a very, not necessarily extremely young, but I was a young lovesick person. I was planning on marrying my wife-to-be. I was very mad. I was mad at the Marine Corps. I was mad at the United States. I was mad at everybody. I said that you're just taking away my life, maybe permanently. I hope not.
So walk me into the Chosin Reservoir. I mean, you were at UDAMNE and you start up. I mean,
well, that was actually backing up. I mean, we'd moved up there for probably a couple of weeks on, and as I wrote to my wife, I said, well, it seemed like we're always moving every day, which we did, and it's getting colder than hell. And I just can't get warm. I'm cold. And anyway, we finally ended up to UDAMNE, and the idea was that we were going to, as soon as we regrouped and got everything together, we'd keep on moving right up, which is about 60 miles to the Ottawa River. That'd be the end of the war. We might get home by Christmas. But because of the poor intelligence, which should never have happened, and where you can argue this with anybody or historians, that how 120,000 people could be hiding in different parts and have moved around to surrounding a big forest like we had. It's still debated. It's never happened before, and probably will never happen again.
So when did you first meet resistance yourself?
Well, it was probably back to, like I said, you went through Coterie, you're going north, Coterie, Hagaroo, which is basically a supply place, and on up to UDAMNE. And there were skirmishes all the way around, but like I said before, There were just a few Chinese laundrymen, so what's worry about it? They're just, we get rid of them, that's the end. And it wasn't that way at all.
So tell me about encountering the enemy. Was it at night? Was it during the day? Was it a charge? Was it sniper fire?
Things were, UDAMNI was in a valley surrounded by mountains, not necessarily real high ones, but well, I would call them hills, but they're known as mountains. But anyway, for a couple of days, it was just kind of getting our act together and putting up tents and a few other things, and with the idea that we get enough supplies up there, we'll move on. But obviously, one night, like I said, as far as I'm concerned, it was on my birthday. About 10 o'clock at night, all of a sudden, heard all this firing up and around, all around us, and things just went berserk. And they had to be real careful because they caught a lot of these people up on the hills that were on patrol and stuff. They'd laid down for the night in sleeping bags, zipped them up, fell asleep. And obviously they got overrun, and it was just very lucky that they reinforced the place enough to hold them back. And then of course, well, that's basically the start of the Chosin Reservoir campaign, which lasted for roughly about 2 weeks, till we got down to Hung Dam, and we were relieved and taken out by ship and back down to Busan, and that's another story.
Well, I'm focusing on the Chosin Reservoir. I've heard a lot of stories. We're fighting the Chinese. I heard they blew bugles. Did you hear anything like that? Tell me about something. Give me.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I wasn't exactly at that particular time right on the hills. I was down below. But even in that, I mean, especially on cold nights, that noise just echoes through the valleys and stuff. I mean, it's kind of eerie. And basically, I mean, it's something, and I doubt very much that Hollywood could ever repeat that and make it sound realistic, because it's just something that's in your mind and you don't forget it. Mm-hmm. And it's, if anything, the idea is to scare you. And
psychological?
Maybe, yeah. Drums, bugles, whatever. And
was it effective in shaking you guys up?
I think, like I said, I wasn't that close at the particular time, but I've talked to other guys that were, and he said after get over the first part of hearing this stuff, well, after that it was basically helpful, because they knew the enemy was coming. But before that, it was just kind of a, what do I do? What is that? So. Can
you describe the combat in Korea where you were at?
Yeah, well, like I said, everybody coming down, this is a 78-mile overgrown cow path. That's the only road up there. And there's no way of saying, well, let's take this road. There is no other road. So, and the United States is mechanized outfits. The Chinese are basically on their feet. So they can go across country with everything they got. Now we have to basically depend on this road. Well, that was a smart way for the Chinese. They thought, well, that's the end of this story. All we have to do is make a bunch of roadblocks, shoot every driver, but they did not know that every American boy knows how to drive. So if somebody got shot, whoever's walking by is now a driver. So consequently, that ploy of the Chinese did not work. And but even so, I mean, there was no way that we were going to be able to defend ourselves or finish this fight, or whatever you want to call it, without the Air Force dropping the supplies. And that was our ace in the hole. And I just told the other Johnson that was here, and I said, if it wasn't for the Air Force, I wouldn't be talking to you right now, because they brought the supplies, the guns, the ammunition, the food, whatever they could drop down there. And yes, a whole bunch of it dropped in the enemy lines, but still some got to us.
So you're goal is to get to the top and come down? I mean, again, what kind of weapon were you carrying?
I had one,
Okay.
and that was basically the main rifle of that particular era. Besides some, well, whatever you could scrounge. A lot of the guys, because it was close combat fighting, they liked to grab Chinese burp guns and stuff. I never fired one myself, but they said it were very effective for close-in combat, but they were worthless for anything else. So,
did you get into hand-to-hand combat at all?
I did not, no. My wife has always asked me, well, did I shoot anybody? Well, most of the firefights were at night, because the Chinese knew they didn't have a chance during the daytime, but they had the more people, more everything, and that was their type of fighting is at night. So consequently, I mean, you fire at them and they fire at you, and they probably don't know any more than we did.
You said that was a 78-mile road?
Yeah.
78 miles?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And
from where to where?
From basically Hungnam on up to U Dam Ni. And then, of course, they had, I wasn't on the east side, which is basically an army unit, but I mean, I've read, have letters, books, whatever. I know quite a bit about it, and a lot of our members that were over there, medics and some seriously wounded people that are still around today.
I'd like to talk to them.
Yeah, well, like I said, the most important person lives in Prescott.
Yeah.
And he was on the other side of the Chosin Reservoir, and they completely got almost wiped out. They only had a few people, and those that did escape crowded across this frozen Chosin Reservoir to the Marine lines. But he, in turn, because he'd been in this truck, they'd put all the wounded in there, and then the enemy come and overrun them and set the trucks on fire, and went in and made sure and bayoneted and shot everybody and whatever, and he feigned death. And he got out of the truck some way and crawled on his elbows and stuff until somebody picked him up off the ice about part way and took him back. He has no fingers, no legs.
What's his name?
Edward Reeves.
He lives in Prescott.
Yeah, and I have all the information for you. In fact,
I'll need to get that at some point.
And he'd love to. In fact, he's one of the most important Korean veterans of the United States. For the simple reason that a few years ago on Memorial Day, he was the president's personal guest at. He was so important, and he goes around the whole world telling his story. He's Russia, South America.
He lives in Prescott.
Yeah.
I'm working on getting up there, Wakeland, home up there. Brad knows him.
So and he has his personal book, and it'll make you.
Do you know him personally?
Oh, one of my best friends.
Just make a note to have him contact this man. Maybe sometime I would love to, when I get up to Prescott, to talk with him.
He's the type of person. When you asked me, I was thinking of people here, but he's a person that would be very happy to talk to you.
Well, that makes me feel good to hear that.
Yeah, and he'll make you cry, because you'll think, how can he is such a good humor person with all these problems.
Was he with the Army then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you tell me, Bob, a little bit what you know about the Army there before the Marines and how they were overrun? Can you give me that story?
Well,
basically what happened?
I'm kind of feel funny about talking about the Army.
Well, just from history, I mean, what happened to the Army?
Well, obviously they, my personal opinion, I just figured that they did not have the good leadership or it wouldn't have happened. And they just got overrun, period. I mean, they didn't have enough people out scouting or whatever. And I mean, in other words, it just happened. And they got down to a few men, and I mean, like I said, they had all these trucks full of wounded stacked up on with plywood and make another layer of wounded. And then there was one of the Chinese come in and they had nothing. I mean, it was just, they were all at their mercy, and they don't have any mercy. I mean, it was one of the very few that got out.
Because you don't hear a lot in history about the Army at the Chosin Reservoir. In fact, I've never really had maybe a couple from the Army that were even considering a part of the campaign, but they were overrun.
Yeah, and like I said, this they have a separate story. They really do, and I do hope you get together with Ed, because and he's not a person that's going to gloss it over. He's going to tell you exactly the facts, and all you have to do is look at him, and he's telling the honest to God truth, what happened to him. And we have the Marines drove jeeps out on the ice and met these few stragglers back and took them back to our lines and flew them out of there. He was declared dead many, many times. They put him up when he got to the hospital in Japan. They put the people that are no hope in this room and the ones that they probably can save over this one. And he said, "Don't you dare put me in that room." And he said, "Well, you're going to die anyway." He says, "Not, if I do, it's going to be your fault. Over there, please."
Bob, tell me about the casualties that you saw or during your part of the Chosin Reservoir. What kind of injuries, what kind of casualties were you seeing?
Well, like I said, I mean, there was a lot of people that were so tired they lay down and just died. They weren't shot or anything. They just give up. I mean, there's no hope. We're not going to get out of here. And even though their officers said, "We will, if we either all get out or nobody gets out." But even so, I mean, your mind goes completely blank. I mean, you don't care. You're so cold, and you think, "Well, I'll just lay down here for a minute and I'll rest a few minutes," and you never wake up. Mm-hmm.
It's just mind-boggling to...
As I say, I wish I had these pictures in this room here, because the pictures tell a lot more than the words that I'm speaking. And they're just, like I said, you also talk about the Chinese. We didn't have near the troubles they had, because I was told many times that they've got these, some of them just came in as prisoners. They wanted us to capture them because they were so cold and everything, and they went to help them out and picked them up and their legs broke off, just like a frozen drumstick. So it was hell.
Bob, how do you get through this mentally? I mean, the mental aspect of war, with the cold, the enemy, the hopelessness. How did you get through? Was it your training? Did you have faith in God? How did you get through this?
Well, we believed our officers. As I said before, we either all get out of here or nobody gets out. We're not going to cut and run. We're not going to give up. We're not going to do anything. We're going to fight as a unit. And it worked.
Did you feel like you were fighting for God and country over there, or for each other, or for survival?
I think of myself, I thought I was fighting for survival. I mean, obviously later on maybe it was a little bit of other things, but at the time that was, you watch my back and I'll watch yours.
The Marine Corps camaraderie, was it there?
Yeah. As I have a hat in my car that my daughter gave me today for my birthday. Once a Marine, always a Marine. And I had the choice of wearing this, the Chosin Few hat, or that one. So I'm the president of the Arizona chapter of Chosin Few survivors, and with my wife's help, we talk all the time. We try to get new people. We respect those that die. We take care of their wives. Whatever we can do in this all to remember the forgotten war and the Chosin Reservoir.
This is kind of off the subject, but this gentleman in Prescott. Do you think he would come down for an interview?
He might, because he's also he also belongs to the Korean War Veterans Association, and they have a chapter named for him.
I don't want to take any more time on the interview now, but...
Larry, his wife has to drive you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if there's a way to contact him after the interview, you might mention that I've interviewed you and if he'd be open to come down tomorrow or Saturday.
I mean, I could obviously can't promise that.
Or anybody else local in the area. We'll talk about this later. Let's get back to this, but I want to just make a mention of that. Okay, Bob, so I'm still trying to grasp what you were thinking, what you saw. I mean, in not having
Well,
been in
that was,
combat, I mean,
put it this way, Larry, that when I got back to the States and went home for 30 days leave, within 2 weeks we got married. And after we'd been together for a short time, or maybe longer, and she'd like to know what happened. I said, I don't want to talk about it. And I didn't for about 20 years. It was, I didn't want to listen about it, I didn't want to hear about it, and I don't want to know anything about it, and I don't want to talk about it. But then, when they found out they were putting together a group of Chosin Reservoir survivors, we got together in 1985 in San Diego for our first reunion, and we cried on each other's shoulders. We talked about what had happened. The first time for all of us. None of us had said anything about it for roughly 20 years. And it all came out, and it helped a whole bunch. It was just like therapy.
well, that's an interesting thought. Why do you think it is good to talk about it? Because a lot haven't.
Because I think that's what happens to a lot of, not necessarily just the Korean War, but lots of World War II, probably Vietnam to a degree, that people that we call homeless, druggies, whatever, they never found themselves when they come back, and nobody will listen to them. And until they get that out of their system, and maybe they'll live for a long time, or maybe they'll only live one day, or maybe they'll jump off a bridge. But by talking about this stuff with your own group, not to somebody that don't even know you, it makes a whole bunch of difference.
I agree. Are there sights and sounds or smells today that remind you of Korea?
Well, I still jump when I hear quiet. I mean, just talking, all of a sudden there's a firecracker or something, or a backfire or whatever. I mean, we all jump. Look behind our back.
How long have you been married?
55 years, as of October.
So you got married in 51?
Yeah.
Right after the Chosin Reservoir?
Yeah, as soon as I got back.
Were you writing back and forth? Did you have an opportunity to write to your wife?
I
Your
got,
wife-to-be?
that's a book that we have. All the letters, I wrote her over 300 letters from Korea. And they're all in that book.
Are you proud that you're a Marine?
Yes. Once a Marine, always a Marine. You don't say you're a former Marine, you're still one.
Your training had a lot to do with your survival?
No. I didn't have enough training. I think I just more or less see what somebody else was doing. They always said to get a hold of somebody that was in World War II, which we had some people in there, and keep your head down and until you know the facts of life or whatever. Don't be a hero. So I'm still here.
Did you have close friends that were killed or wounded over there?
Yes.
Anybody in particular that might come to mind?
Well, one of our Artie was still, my wife was still in high school, and the reserves took a whole bunch out of her class, and quite a few never came back. And one of them we were both knew. His also name was Johnson, Norman Johnson from Tacoma, Washington, and he. In fact, we were just reading a letter today, one of the old letters about that, wondering about it, and I told her, I said, well, if we were hoping that somebody would find him, or maybe he was captured or something, but he ended up being dead. So nothing you can do about that, luck of the draw.
Why did you come back, Bob? Why did you survive?
you won't believe it, but I said I had my love to keep me warm, and I had something to get back to.
Did you guys sleep in sleeping bags?
When you could, but for as far as men on the lines, you can't. You have to leave your gear behind, and you just can't carry it with you. Go pick it up if you're back. If you're lucky, pick it back up later.
So how did you sleep, or where did you sleep?
You didn't. We don't, I didn't even wash my hands or anything for over 14 days, and descriptions that I have in the letter that said maybe we'll start looking like a white man today. Then I had about 12 or 14 pieces of clothing on when I got down out of that place. And I was just filthy, had lice and whatever.
It's unimaginable. I mean,
Yeah.
back here you can't even imagine.
I got down and they put us down in Mason, which is about 30 miles from Pusan, to regroup and whatever. But when I went over, left the States, I wore a size 10. And when I was in this deal, I was at times wearing a size 14. And for that reason, they couldn't get shoes for me or whatever, and they were hoping my feet eventually went down, but as I speak now, I still wear a size 12. So my feet have never really completely got back to normal.
Why do you think they referred to Korea as the Forgotten War?
Well, pick up any history book and see how many pages is in there. And it's in some fact of it, just a gloss over a paragraph that there was a war in 1950 in Korea. And then you check Vietnam, check World War II, check Panama, check any of them. I mean, there's more information about all the wars except Korea. So that doesn't that mean a forgotten war?
Well, that's one reason I'm doing this, is so people will know.
And that's one reason why I'm here letting you interview me, because anything I can do, and many other people say the same thing. That's our goal as the Chosin Reservoir survivors, is to get the Korean War somewhat remembered.
That's what we're working to do. I want you to know that.
Yeah.
We've been successful with World War II, now Korea and Vietnam.
Yeah.
So my father was in Korea, but I know nothing of his experience. So, but
Yeah.
you know, being a Korea War veteran and living in this country, Bob, what does freedom mean to you?
It means a whole bunch, for the simple reason that it's us and the Korean War veterans, and also Vietnam, as far as that goes, to keep this freedom free. And if we decide to let someone else do the job, who knows whether they do a good job or not. So the best way for us to do is we have to get involved, and do what you have to do. We want to keep freedom for this country and for anyone else, including the whole world, if it was possible.
Bob, what does the American flag mean and represent to you as a veteran?
What it does to me, it gets me teary-eyed. And it says the Star-Spangled Banner, the flag going by, God bless America, people in uniform. It means a lot to me. It probably wouldn't have if I hadn't been involved personally.
Do you think our society as a whole has forgotten or is forgetting about what happened in the war, Korea, World War II?
Well, I think to a degree that's probably true, but on the other hand, there's enough veterans around that we wouldn't spend our time in parades, giving interviews and all the rest if we didn't think it was a worthwhile situation. And if that helps a lot, it helps.
You know, back at the Chosin Reservoir again, I've interviewed a couple of dozen survivors, and I've just heard some amazing stories of survival and bravery. I mean,
Yeah.
Again, I'm just very fascinated by what you went through and how you survived, and
Yeah.
and you know, I mean, Tell me some more about the Chinese. I mean, what kind of soldier were they? Are they young kids,
They were-
old men? What?
The Chinese were good soldiers, but like I said, it was a code that beat them. We may have not beat them, maybe we did, I don't know. Maybe it was a draw. They had many, many more troops than we have. But they're also using the more or less the kamikaze idea that you have enough troops you can overrun anybody. Well, maybe so, but you're not going to run over every Marine. Eventually, you're going to end up pushing the wrong person, and it's going to be the end of you. It's usually a case of shooting at each other, and not necessarily the survival of the fittest, I guess, is probably the name of the game. And when you're start out and everybody's equal, but we have the better manpower and everything, so we don't need as many troops as they did. And otherwise, we would have lost for sure. In fact, really, I mean, the war isn't over. They only signed a temporary armistice in 1953, and the war is hot. I mean, you don't hear about everything about it, but you're talking about enough of us people, we read this fine print on the back page of the paper and so on, and you'll find out that we still got troops over there that at any time this thing could blow up in our face. But
were there a lot of Chinese casualties that you would see when you were there, or they?
Well, yeah, I saw enough of them. I mean, but I also saw the casualties of our own side, so it could be whichever way you want to look at it. I mean, it's just bad. And as I say, when you're walking along the road and here's a bunch of your people laying in the ditches dead, well, somebody did it.
Was there any air support or artillery support during the Chosin Reservoir?
Oh yeah, if it hadn't been for the Air Force, I wouldn't be here talking to you right now, because as I said, there was only one way in and one way out. Block off the road, that's the end of the war, so they thought, but they forgot about these nice airplanes flying overhead. In fact, we have members in our chapter that were pilots, and they can tell more about that than I ever could, but I just know from their personal experience what happened to them, and it was all, the code also affected them, because these planes just don't do good job with this dog code. No, I don't do any good a job, and neither do they, neither the airplanes. So it's do what you can.
Boy, what year did you get out of the Marine Corps?
52 February. I probably would have stayed in, but my wife was pregnant and whatever, and they were also talking about maybe going to the early part of Vietnam, Dien Bien Phu or whatever you call it. I didn't want to go back over there again, so I said, just count me out. So maybe, who knows whether I would have stayed in, what had happened, I don't know.
Do you think there's parts of what happened in Korea that maybe you blocked out of your mind because they were so terrible, or?
Well, not really, because I've spoken so much about it and have so many pictures and the letters and everything else. I think probably I'm more as knowledge of their personal happening over there than anybody. And the more I talk, the easier it is.
Did you shoot your rifle at the enemy?
Oh yeah, everybody did.
Close range, long range?
Most of it was at night, so you don't see nothing. It's tracers. So it's hard to say. You always said, well, did I shoot anybody? I don't know.
What's the sound of combat sound like? What do you think about when I ask you that? What's the sound of combat?
It's just, like I said, between the enemy's noise, bugles and whatever, and all the the firepower and machine guns and mortars and everything else and flares, you name it. You don't know if your name's going to be on the end of one or not.
Well, you came back home.
Yeah.
That's good. Does that bother you anymore like that, or was that just in the past?
Once in a while.
Yeah.
He has a
Well, they said this is 55 years later, but for like the few years, like she just said, that in fact I don't remember, I have never remembered this dream. She says that I had it at one time almost every night, running,
The cold
shivering.
this dream.
Sure.
In the dream.
We're just about done with the interview. I want to see some of those pictures. Can we bring those in here? Okay.
Yeah,
Let's finish. I got one more thing I want to ask you to do for me on camera, okay? I asked all the veterans to do this, and I understand the protocol in the Marine Corps, but from where you're seated, for the camera's sake, when I tell you, can you give me a salute into the camera? Just give me a second here. Okay, Bob, salute right into the camera there. Great.